So you can work in both Adobe Photoshop, Illustrator, whatever program to create your artwork. You're just going to need to bring it over into Adobe Photoshop to create a true halftone that we can control. You can make halftones in Illustrator or any other program, but we don't have as much control over them as we do in Photoshop. So this is an image. I want to see how it looks like with a halftone applied to it, but I don't want to halftone everything. I don't recommend halftoning text. It obscures it quite a bit, makes it a bit illegible. So whenever I'm halftoning, I always keep my original and I don't modify it. This, I want to just remove all the stuff I don't want to halftone. So probably all this black. But the rest I'm going to halftone. So duplicate that one more time. And I'm just going to place this layer right here. So now this is the area I'm not going to halftone, but this is the image I am going to halftone. And just for a little bit more fun, I'm going to add a gradient to this. I'm going to make it round, but not as dark. Yeah, I think that's good. Okay. So now I'm going to export this as a Photoshop file. Go to File, Export As, and then go all the way down to Photoshop, hit Use Artboards, and then I only want the second artboard. So I'm going to just do my range at 2 to 2. I've got it saved. Make sure it's at high 300 ppi or higher. You can do 600, and make sure you have right layers. If the file size is too big, you can export it as a PNG or JPEG. Just know this will flatten out your image. You would want to save it as a Photoshop file if you wanted to play around with the layers. So I'm just going to export it as a PNG because it got quite big. So export, keep it high. You can either do transparent or white layer. So now I'm going to take my image and drag it into Photoshop. And there it is. Now what we want to do is convert our values here into one color layer, which is going to be a halftone. So if it should be in black and white, if it's not in black and white, you'll go to Image Mode, Grayscale. You have to use Grayscale first before going into your halftone layer. You can make adjustments here if you need to create contrast. Highly recommend creating contrast. It's nice to mess around real quick. And then you'll go to Image Mode, Bitmap. You'll notice you had to go to Grayscale before you can go to Bitmap. So as you notice here, Bitmap isn't available. The image has to be in Grayscale first before you can go to Bitmap. Now Bitmap is going to make everything either black or white. So make sure you have 300. This is going to be your line screen, same as your DPI. And then make sure to have halftone screen checked. Now you can mess around with the settings here. The settings come from this halftone line screen that was printed using a 230 mesh screen. As you can see here, I used a 35-degree angle for this, but if you're only using one halftone, you can pick whatever angle you like. Pay close attention to the LPI, meaning the lines per inch, to the left, and the value percentages at the bottom of this chart. You'll use this to select your LPI screen as well as your angle for your print. So looking at this halftone line reference sheet, you can see what 10 LPI all the way to 60 LPI looks like. 60 LPI is really detailed but difficult to print. 50 is a larger dot, but again, it starts to get a little too dark. 40 and 30 though look really great. Now the dot size gets a lot bigger, but it has a nice smooth transition from our 10%, 20, 30, 40, all the way to our 100% black. So I'm deciding to pick either 30 or 40 LPI. Now you get all the way to 10 LPI, it gets really kind of Roy Lichtenstein cartoon-like. You see the detail really gets lost. So a 20 to 40 LPI is a good idea for somewhat detailed imagery. I'm going to use a 40. Here's a close-up of the halftone pattern at 40 LPI. This entire print was printed on a 230 mesh screen at a 35-degree angle. This LPI was determined by the halftone mesh formula of your mesh count divided by 4.5 equaling your LPI. So 230 divided by 4.5 yielding the maximum LPI. Now, if you want to know what mesh count you should use, you could do your LPI times 4.5 to equal your mesh count. This is where that equation and the settings of your screen applies. So for me, I'm going to stick with a 40 line screen, and then my angle, I'm going to do 35 degrees, and I can do any of these shapes, but I'm going to do an ellipse, and then I'm going to hit apply. So as you can see, that ellipse was applied everywhere here, even to the subtlety of this screen. And now I have all my values treated as one color. Now I'll save this as, you could save it as whatever you like. I'm going to stick with a PNG. Place your file back into Adobe Illustrator, go to File, Place, find your original file right here, hit Place. If you line it up with the corner, should place right in the same spot, and there you go. What's nice is that gradient really did some great halftones here. So now I have one color, but several values. And so that is one halftone layer. Let's move on to a few halftone layers. This is 3 layers. These layers I've actually imported into Photoshop. So as you can see, this is my key layer, and then I have 2 color layers. These 2 I'm going to apply halftones. This one I'm not. It's just going to be a flat blue. So I'm going to type key layer. And my colors. Okay. So by unchecking this one, I know I'm not going to touch it. Now, before you halftone, be sure to save. Save this. Save, save, save. So I'm going to save this as an original file in case I mess up. And now, in order to halftone everything, I'm actually going to create a duplicate artboard. So let's make sure I remember the canvas size. Canvas size should be 11 by 17. It is. So I'm going to go to I'm going to make a new one. I'm going to type in 11 inches by 17 inches and make sure it is 300 resolution. It's very important. I always do CMYK for printing and hit create. So I'm going to copy and paste each individual layer out of here. Because of the finicky image mode, I always just do my halftones in a different layer. So I'm going to copy my magenta layer. and paste it directly in. As you can see here, it's just the layer by itself. I'm going to go to image mode, grayscale, convert this all to grayscale. You can flatten it if you want because it's on its own layer, its own file. And then, if you need to make any adjustments, you can. You want to adjust contrasts, and then apply your bitmap. So again, 300 halftone screen. This one is a magenta layer, so let's see what angles I can get away with. So I always look up CMYK angles. This isn't going to be a CMYK print, but this does give me some guidance on what angles I can achieve so I don't get a moire. A moire looks like this. So when you have weird angles, you get this optical illusion, which is kind of cool, but sometimes what you don't want to get in a print. So this tells me this is a good following. My darkest color could be 75 if I had it, 45, 15, and 0. I'm not a fan of 45. It sometimes looks mechanical. So let's do this arrangement. Maybe like a 15 and a 75. Because I only have 2 layers. So I'm keeping my frequency the same, but I'm going to do 15 for my magenta. And as you can see here, it applied my halftone. Now what I'm going to do is, you can't do anything to it until you bring it back to grayscale. So I'm going to copy that in and paste it and say magenta halftone. Like so. Now I have a record of my magenta, and I will do the same with my radiant blue. So I'm going to select all, copy it, and then I'm going to get rid of this layer, paste it in, make sure to paste in place so it's on the exact same spot, and I'll do the same thing, except I'll adjust my angle. Flatten. As you can see here, it's black and white. You can adjust the contrast if you feel like there's not enough contrast, which I am. And go to image mode, bitmap. And I did 15, so now I want to do 75. And now my halftone's been applied. I'm going to select all, Command A, Command C to copy, and I'm going to paste it in here. So I'm going to go radiant blue, halftone. Now I have all my halftones, and so now I have all my files ready to go. I would save this as halftone. Now let's preview them with their colors. So first let's go to our magenta halftone. Make sure your magenta is the swatch in the foreground color. So I'm going to activate the magenta layer and collect this color and copy the hex color below. Now click into the magenta layer and use the magic wand tool to delete the non-image area. It's easier to select the white space. Make sure your tolerance is pretty high, 30 to 40, so you don't accidentally delete some halftones. And then to ensure you've selected all the white, go to Select, Similar. Once you've done that, just hit the backspace with the layer selected, double click into the layer, and apply your color. So we have the first. We'll do the same thing with the radiant blue. So I'm going to sample this blue here. You can adjust if you need to. Activate the halftone layer, magic wand tool, select similar, delete, color overlay, and voila. Let's do a little bit darker there. And now we have both halftones applied to each other. I'm going to put my key, and there is the image. Now I'm going to save this one as my mockup. Now I'm going to show you how to set up your file size so that you can hold all of your artwork in one Illustrator file. Let's back up real quick and set up our entire file. So I'm going to actually delete my registration marks except one. I'm just going to hold it to the side out here. Okay, let's add 3 more artboards. These are going to hold my films. This is the original here. Remember, it's always important to keep an original. And I just want to space these out to allow for my artboard bleed. Okay, so now I have my registration marks, original file, and 3 artboards set up. Now I'll go to File, Document Setup, and go into Bleed. So for this, I want to have at least 1/2 inch bleed all the way around, like so. Now the bleed is really going to hold my crop marks. I could extend my image if I want to, but it's going to hold my crop marks for now. So taking this crop mark, I'm going to actually rotate it till it lines up with my paper here. So I need to make a little bit of modification. I don't want my crop marks to touch my image, and then I'm just going to make my registration marks fit, pull down my crop marks here, and now I have the first side of my printer's marks. I'm going to select them, copy and paste. These are all grouped together, that's why I can select them all. And then holding shift, I can easily drag it to the other side and make sure it's lined up. And then I'm going to select both, copy, and then edit, paste in place. This time I'm going to object, transform, reflect, do a horizontal reflection, and drag those down here till they line up there. That's an easy way to keep consistent. Now with these registration marks, it's important that they stay in the exact same spot each time. So I'm going to group them, and I'm going to make my own layer with them. So new layer, paste them in, or go to edit, paste in place, and do registration marks. And lock. So now I can't touch those, but if I wanted to duplicate those, I could. It's also nice to be able to not have to see them all the time either. Alright, but let me unlock that and copy, and I'm going to paste it onto all artboards. So now I have crop marks in the same spot on all artboards. I'm going to lock those registration marks so they don't go anywhere. So I'm going to go back into my Photoshop layer here and try to save my file so I can import it into Illustrator. So I'm going to save it, Photoshop, and then go into Illustrator, and I'm actually just going to open it. So let's open that file, halftone, and as you can see here, it's asking if I want to convert the layers to objects. Yes, I do. And now all I have to do is just import each of these layers into my file. So copy it. Now please save this file as your film file. This is not what you're submitting to me, but this is just going to be your film file. And then the one you submit for printing, you're actually going to remove this artboard because we don't want to print our original. You can keep it in the file if you need to, but only the artworks you want printed need to still be artworks here. Now you're going to save as, and you're going to save it as a PDF. Hit save. You're going to keep preserve Illustrator editing capabilities and make sure use document bleed settings is checked. Hit save PDF. Make sure your name is on the PDF. And then lastly, preview it before you submit. So when I preview it, I can see my image as well as all my crop marks. Now, if you really want to make sure they all line up, go to full screen and just click through it. If your crop marks and your artwork doesn't move, there's no jumping, you're in good shape.